Hey, Inspired Moneymaker. In this episode, we're going to hear how one song, Rachel's Song, transformed a career and became a full-time business. Episode 237 features Dave Combs, songwriter, author, publisher.
The sound starts playing through the sound system, and I noticed that everybody in the store kind of stops. When something really gets your attention, people kind of, whoa, what's that music I'm hearing? So I realized that this music not only enthralled me and captured my attention, everybody else that heard it was done the same way. That was the first time I really realized that there was probably more to this song than I had really thought there was going to be.
I'm Andy Wong, host of the Inspired Money podcast and financial advisor at Runnymede Capital Management. This episode is brought to you by Yachty.com. My friend Everald Reed launched Yachty to showcase Jamaica's best products and local vendors. With just a couple mouse clicks, I can treat myself to authentic Jamaican Blue Mountain coffee. We love it at our house. It's balanced, full-bodied, but without the bitterness. I also love the breadfruit chips and natural bar soaps. It's great knowing that every purchase at Yachty.com directly supports local Jamaican small businesses. You've got to try Blue Mountain Coffee for yourself. Go to Yachty.com, that's YAAHDY.com, and make sure to use coupon code MONEY for 10% off your entire order. Try it and let me know what you think. Now on to the show. Today's guest grew up in Erwin, Tennessee, in a family that enjoyed making music. This is Dave's story of going from computer programmer to full-time songwriter. We're going to hear how being an artist alone is not enough to succeed commercially. Dave's success in music allowed him to leave his corporate job, but it required problem-solving and perseverance, from finding a recording studio to successfully managing his own sales and distribution. His new book, Touched by the Music, How the Story and Music of Rachel's Song Can Change Your Life, is now for sale. The foreword is written by Jack Canfield, co-author of Chicken Soup for the Soul. In this episode, you'll learn how Dave wrote a song and 9 years later was able to quit his corporate job, the importance of forging one's own way in the music business, and tune into the end to hear why the local librarian could be every entrepreneur's secret weapon. Now let's get inspired with Dave Combs. Dave, welcome to Inspired Money. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Well, I'm excited to be here. This is going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this since we hooked up. This is great.
Yeah, let's jump right in. What's your earliest childhood memory of money?
Well, when I was a little kid, we didn't have a lot of money. That's probably maybe why I don't have a lot of memories of early money in terms of lots of it anyway. But my earliest influence and memories about money was when I basically decided that I would raise potatoes for my elementary school. Now here I am as a 6th, 7th grader in school, and we had an acre of land, and my mom was working basically as a single mom at the time, raising me and my brother. And to help put me through, help out with the family, I planted about a half an acre of Irish potatoes. And I babied those things. I dared a weed to come up in my garden. I mean, but what I ended up with was a garden full of beautiful potato plants that produced it. I only had to dig maybe about 5 feet, and I had a bushel of potatoes. I mean, it was prolific. And I think I sold them for like $5 a bushel to the elementary school. And that was my earliest entrepreneurial effort of trying to make some money for the family, and it worked, and it was hard work, but it also did what it was supposed to, and taught me a lesson in how to grow things and turn it into some cash, and also I fed potatoes to my entire elementary school.
I love that story. I didn't know that farming was going to be a part of this story. I'm excited to talk to you as a former software programmer and a songwriter, author, publisher. When you were a kid and you were growing up, what is it that you aspired to be?
Well, I had several aspirations. when I went into high school, first of all, I found out in the 8th grade that I loved mathematics. My 8th grade teacher, she was also the principal of the school, Mrs. Moore, bless her heart, she wasn't very good in math, and I was. And so she whether she was playing dumb or not, I do not know, but she would often turn over the math lessons in my 8th grade class to me. I would go up to the chalkboard and help solve the problems and illustrate whatever because I was good in math. And she said she wasn't, but I'm not sure but what she was a clever teacher to extract that gift out of me. And so that was when I realized I love math and science. I always have. And so when I went to high school, I took all the math and science courses, advanced math, but I also took shop and drafting, mechanical drawing. I thought I was going to be an architect. I loved drawing, whether it was, precise drawings with a pencil and a protractor and the very architectural or machine drawings, or I also liked sketching things and drawing things. So I thought I was going to be an architect. And then my senior year, we had an assembly program, and the guest speaker that day was a professor from East Tennessee State University who came to talk to us about this newfangled device called a computer. Now, this was in 1965, so computers were the size of desks and didn't have, the memory was measured in K, not megs or gigs. So, but this fellow, Stan Johnson was his name, and so I sat there and I listened to him talk about all the things that computers could do. And it was all related to math and everything. And we were invited to go on a tour of the computer center and see what computers looked like and so forth. I was smitten. I absolutely changed my mind just like that. I am not going to be an architect. I'm going to go into computers. That's what I'm going to do. And I decided I'm going to go to East Tennessee State University and work in the math department and see if I can get a job working for this gentleman, this professor, Stan Johnson, and work my way through college in the computer center. And that's exactly what I did. He hired me as a student worker in the computer center. So when I wasn't in class, I could come and work in the computer center. So I learned from him, not just computers and whatever, but I learned a lot from him as a manager, as a mentor, as a person. He was and still is, he's still living and is a wonderful, wonderful person. And so I really learned a whole bunch from him. And that was when my career changed and I decided to get into computers. So at my end of my 4 years of college, I had 4 years of experience in computer programming. And Western Electric, the company, the subsidiary of AT&T, was looking for computer programmers. They found out I had 4 years experience. The guy that I interviewed with, he offered me a job on the spot. He says, I said, here's the job offer. Are you prepared to accept it? And I said, yes, sir, I am prepared to accept your offer. When can I start? And so I did. That was how my career kind of switched gears, but it started down the path of technology. And that was I haven't regretted that at all because I still love working with computers. And I probably own almost every Apple computer they've ever made. I love working with technology. I love doing these podcasts and, figuring out which microphone's best to use and how to hook it all up. And I've got a green screen behind me here that I figured out how to use that and put it up. And so I love technology, but I also love music. I found out a long time ago that scientists and mathematicians and engineers, by and large, a lot of them are fabulous musicians. I don't know. I think probably there have been studies that show that the scientific mind tends to lend itself to certain kinds of music. Well, I found that a lot of the people I worked with in Western Electric and Bell Labs that were fabulous scientists were great piano players and musicians as well. So I guess that the science in me and my music in me kind of go together, and so that's kind of normal.
That is cool. Well, as a fan of Apple computers, you may appreciate that my first personal computer was an Apple II that had 64K of memory.
Okay.
And I probably have it sitting in this wall behind me in the storeroom. I'll have to fish that out later.
Well, I'm sitting here. I'm sitting here looking at an Apple II right over here on my desk. It hadn't been turned on in years, but it's still sitting over there under the desk. An Apple II CI, I think it was called Apple II. Oh, maybe it was Apple II CE. And we have one of the original Apple SE. It was the very first computer that Apple made that was all the screen and everything was built into one. It was called Apple SE, and it had a keyboard, the screen, and ironically, it was given to my wife by Steve Wozniak.
No way.
She was working for the governor of North Carolina at the time in education. She was his education advisor. And Apple, you may recall, one of their first marketing strategies was to get Apple into the schools. They figured if they got all the kids hooked on apples, then they would take off elsewhere. So their strategy was to introduce Apple computers to the education community. They invited all of the education advisors to all 50 governors to Cupertino for a special conference. My wife went. Got to sign all these non-disclosure agreements and stuff, and got to see all the whiz-bang stuff coming out later and all that. And at the end of the conference, Steve says, all right, all of you attendees are going to be given a new Apple SE to use for a year for free. And we're going to set up this newfangled, it was the precursor to email. It wasn't called email at the time, but it was a way to communicate with your other 49 people electronically, give you a printer, a computer, and free use of it for a year. Well, that was the puppy dog sale of the century. Here, take this little puppy dog, and if you don't want it, you can bring it back. Well, nobody ever brings it back, right? What a clever marketing strategy. But that was our introduction.
Well, Linda, it is like straight from the source. So that is great. So I want to ask you, because it sounds like you didn't grow up with a lot of money. You went to school, you became a software programmer. That could have been a successful career, end of story. Did you ever think that you could be a professional songwriter? Like, when did that pop into your head?
Well, I guess maybe even since that potato story from my 6th grade, I've been kind of entrepreneurial in my thinking. I've always enjoyed the thought of working for myself. Now, I enjoyed working for Western Electric. I had a very good job, very good paying, and that, like you said, that could have been a lifelong career. Worked there 40 years, like several of my other friends did, and it's a great career. But along the way, things happen to you. Sometimes I call these defining moments in your life where something happens that you have absolutely no control over, but it changes the course of your life. Well, that was what happened when I was sitting at my piano one evening after work. This is the way I relax when I get home. I just go and sit down at my piano and play something just to relax. You probably do the same thing with a guitar. You just sit down and just, play something. That's very relaxing, isn't it? And so I was sitting there at my piano. This was in January of 1981, and I started playing. And I played this song. Now, I didn't intend to write a song. I didn't even know that it was a song that I had never heard before, but it was a song that came to me. It was an inspired, creative moment, I guess you could call it. I played this song. Well, I didn't think much about it. A couple of days later, my wife Linda comes home, and she worked at the local bank at Wachovia, and she comes in and she says, "Dave, what is the name of this song? I've been humming it in my head all day long." They call it an earworm. You can't get it out of your head. So she says, "What is the name of this?" She hummed a little bit of it, and I said, "Well, it doesn't have a name." She says, "What?" I said, "Yep, it's just something I made up." And so she got all excited and said, "Well, have you written it down?" I said, "No, I've got it up here. I'm not going to forget it." She said, No, something might happen to you, and that song would be gone." So I said, "Okay, I'll write it down." So I wrote down the melody and the chords and stuck it in the piano bench. And I'd play it every now and then. We tried to think of a name for it. Nothing ever fit, so we didn't get very far with that. 2 years later, some good friends of ours have a little baby girl, and they asked me and Linda to be her godparents. Okay, so we go to the christening service, and we're sitting there in the church with the family and the minister, and up at the front of the church in the middle of the platform is this beautiful grand piano. Well, my eye kept looking at that piano, and at the end of the formal part of the service, I asked to punch Linda, and I said, what do you think about me playing this little song now at this service? And it seems appropriate. So she said, okay. And so I went up to the family and the minister. I said, would it be okay if I play this little song that I've written? And they said, well, sure. So everybody sat back down. I go over to the piano, sit down and start playing. And I get halfway through the song, and I hear some sniffles in the crowd, and I noticed that my eyes were getting a little weepy, and it was a very emotionally packed. And when you hear the song and you picture yourself sitting in a christening service, I think you can appreciate why it was so deeply emotional. And when I finished playing the song, I looked up over at little Rachel in the arms of her mother, and I said, from now on, this song will be called Rachel's Song in her honor. And that's how it got its name, and it has stuck, and it's still the perfect name for that tune. But that song and that name and that moment really was just another step in a path that I still had no idea where it was going to lead. Now, fast forward 3 years, I'm traveling for AT&T around the country, implementing software in the factories, trying to help them improve their efficiency. It was called MRP software back then, Manufacturing Requirements Planning. And I was a certified by Apex inventory planner. I'd studied and I got certified at the fellow level. So I was an expert on inventory planning systems. And one of the places that I had to travel to, Andy, was to Nashville, Tennessee. Well, as you know, Nashville, Tennessee is Music City, USA. And Linda says, well, while you're there in Nashville, why don't you go and get a demo recording made of Rachel's song? You know, something we can have and give to Rachel and her family and they can enjoy. And I said, okay, well, that's a good idea. So one evening, I'm riding around in downtown Nashville looking for a studio. Now, I'm in the part of Nashville they call Music Square. It's about 2 square blocks of everything in those blocks is music. It's studios, it's ASCAP, it's BMI headquarters, it's RCA studios, all these music related businesses. And so I was looking for a studio. I went down Roy Acuff Place. You remember the name Roy Acuff? He was a big name in Nashville in country music. They named a street after him, Roy Acuff Place. And at the end of the street was this barn-looking building that had a water wheel out front, a mock-up of a real water. I think it probably was a real water wheel. They'd moved to the place. And the name of the building on the building said the Music Mill. And so I thought, well, that's encouraging. I went around and pulled in the parking lot. Sure enough, through the glass door, I see there's a man sitting at the desk. So oh, great, there's somebody here. So I knocked on the door and he opened it and introduced himself. He says, hi, I'm George Clinton. Can I help you? And I said, well, I'm Dave Combs. I've got this little song that I've written. I'd love to have a demo recording made of it in a studio. And so I'm looking for a studio. Well, he invited me in, and as soon as I got in the lobby, Andy, I looked up on the wall, and here's a great big life-size picture of Glenn Campbell. And over here on the other side was a big old picture of the whole group of the group Alabama. Everybody knows about the group Alabama. And then there's Forrester Sisters, and there's gold records and platinum records all over the place. And so I realized that I had walked into, obviously, a classy place. And I'd never been in a studio. So he gave me a tour of the place, showed me Studio A. There happened to be nobody recording at the time. So I got into Studio A, really impressive, big room. You could put an orchestra in that room. And then the control room looked like something you could launch a spaceship from, with the big console with all the sliders and the knobs and the lights and everything. So I was really impressed. I said, well, how much does this place cost? And he says, well, this is $125 an hour. Now, this is 1986. $125 an hour in 1986 was a lot of money. So I must have looked really disappointed, because he said, well, don't worry. the guy that owns this studio owns a little one across the street that's only $15 an hour. I said, well, I can afford that. So I said, now all I need is a musician, a piano player, to play my song. Do you have a suggestion for me? And he said, he thought for a second. He said, oh yeah, I know just the person for you. He and I go to church together, where he's a great session musician. So he went back to his desk and to his Rolodex. Now, some of your audience won't know what a Rolodex is, but it's the old, the old contact. It's your address book on paper. And so he looked up Gary Prim. And so he wrote down Gary's number, gave it to me. I left, went back to my hotel room, called Gary on the phone. 30 minutes later, he called me back because I got his answering machine, and he said, can I help you? And I said, yep, I need a demo. And can you do this for me? And he said, sure. He said, just send me a cassette tape of recording of you playing it and a lead sheet. And I said, well, okay, but what's a lead sheet? I didn't even know the lingo at the time. I'd never had any experience. It was pretty obvious, I guess. And he said, oh, it's just the melody and the chords written out. I said, well, I've got that. I just didn't know what to call it. So I got back home and I mailed him the lead sheet and the tape of me playing it so he'd know what it sounded like a little bit. He had arranged for 2 weeks later for on a Friday night, August the 22nd, 1986, at 6 p.m. I'll never forget it, at this little studio across the street. It's the first time I ever laid eyes on Gary Prim. He comes into the little studio carrying his Yamaha DX7 synthesizer under his arm, and he sets up, and the engineer and I are in the control room, and Gary is in there in the main room with the piano. It's had a baby grand Yamaha piano, and so he's warming up on the piano. Push record in the control room, and we're ready for him to record. Plays through the song and gets about halfway through and decides, well, I think I need to do that over. So he hits on the piano keys and, all right, rewind it and let's do it again. So we rewound it. Second time through, he plays the song from beginning to end perfectly. No missed notes, nothing. It was perfect.
Did Gary's version, was it pretty much identical to your version at that point, that first time through?
That was amazing. Yeah, the melody was the same, obviously, but I had only played it in the key of C. He played it 2 times, the verse and the chorus twice in the key of C, and then he he transposed it up to the key of D flat. I mean, there was no transition or no modulation. When you listen to the recording, you'll hear it go in the key of C, then all of a sudden, bam, you're in the key of D flat, half step up. And musically, it really accomplishes something amazing because it raises you're already excited and energized by the song, and then when it goes in a half step up, it just raises the level of energy in the song just noticeably. But his arrangement was out of his head. He had took my melody and chords and did his own fingering and notes and runs and all that stuff with it. And then, so I was blown. I would have been happy if he'd have stopped right there and said, okay, I'm done. This is a beautiful piano arrangement. But he said, nope, I'm not done. I want to make this something really special. Let's put in some electric piano, and I'm going to double the notes. And by doubling, he meant he's going to play exactly what he played on the piano on the keyboard. So electric piano sound. So when you hear the recording of Rachel's song, listen into about the chorus part of the first part of it, because the first part's just piano. Then he brings in, he'll notice that the sound gets a little fuller and richer as you hear that electric piano sound on top of the acoustic piano. And so he doubled, from that point on, he doubled the piano part on the electric piano. Then he said, all right, we need some strings to fill this out. I want to put he called it, I want to put some bottom on this, low strings, and I'm going to put some high strings. And so we record 2 more tracks of low strings and 2 more tracks of high strings. And then he says, I need some horns there in the middle where we're going to change keys to D flat. So he flips to the horn sound, and we record 2 tracks with the horns. And then he said, I think that's it. So he comes back in the control room, we wind it up, and we're all listening to it. And I'm sure my mouth was wide open. I was absolutely in total amazement at what I was hearing. Now, you can imagine, Andy, if you had written a simple little song and you'd only played it on your guitar or whatever, and then you take this little song and you give it to a whole group of professional musicians, and it comes back like, man, that sounds as good as anything I ever heard on the radio in my life. It would blow you away, and it did. I was just amazed. And so I paid Gary, and he packed up his stuff and went home, and then the engineer mixed it down to 2-track stereo for me and made me some cassette tapes of it, and gave me my master tape that had been mixed down to 2-track stereo. Paid him, and I'm got my unbelievable sound in my hand here as I'm leaving the place. I get down to my rental car. First thing I do is pop a cassette tape in the player in the rental car, which I had rented to have one because I knew I was going to have a cassette tape. I wanted to hear it. I sat there in the parking lot, listened to that thing maybe a couple of times. Then I finally decided, well, I better head back to the hotel. So on my way back to the hotel, of course, I'd play the cassette, the song, hit rewind, play it again, hit rewind, play it again. I did that. And if you've ever been to Nashville, you know there's a confluence of about 3 interstates that come together in Nashville. I think it's I-40 and 24 and maybe 74. I don't know what it is, but it's 3 of them. And there's all these kind of flyovers and loops and lane changes. If you want to get from here to the airport, you better be in the right lane, or you're not going where you thought you were going because you're too late. The exit went that way and you're going this way. Well, I wasn't apparently paying much attention to where I was going because I noticed that I'd seen this particular billboard at least twice. I had circled Nashville completely at least 2 times by missing my exit to the airport. Well, I finally kind of woke up to my directions and got to the airport and to my hotel near the airport. And of course, then I didn't have any way to play it for my wife. She was back in North Carolina, and I had called her, and she probably thought I'd stopped by the ABC store and had gotten a bottle of something and drunk it on the way home, because I'm sure I was talking a mile a minute about how excited I was about this recording.
You were high on Rachel's song.
That's a good way to put it. I sure was. So anyway, I told her, I said, you're going to love this when I get back to Winston-Salem. I was so excited, I had to play it for somebody, even if I had collared a stranger somewhere and said, sit down and listen to this. I got back out in my rental car, and I went to a place called the Circuit City. It's kind of like Best Buy is now. It was a place that sold stereo equipment. So I went to Circuit City, and I walked in with my cassette tape, and I found me a salesman, and I said, do you all have any really high-end stereo equipment you could play a cassette on? And oh, yeah. I said, well, how about showing it to me? So we went over to the high-end where the really fancy stuff is, and I said, here's a cassette tape. Play this and turn it up. I want to hear it on some really good speakers. So he does, and the sound starts playing through the sound system. And I noticed that everybody in the store kind of stops. When something really gets your attention, people kind of, whoa, what's that music I'm hearing? So I realized that this music not only enthralled me and captured my attention, everybody else that heard it was done the same way. That was the first time I really realized that there was probably more to this song than I had really thought there was going to be. So that was that. And when I finally got back home to Linda, of course, she loved it too. We sat there and listened to it, and I played it for everybody that would listen. And then I played it for a friend of mine who had a radio program. He was an announcer. He had a Saturday morning, a 3-hour show playing big band music. He was a jazz aficionado and had a great radio program. Well, he loved Rachel's song, and he said, Dave, you got to let me play this song on the radio, my radio program. I said, okay. So I loaned him my master tape. It's only the high quality version of it I had was my master tape. I said, take care of this. This is the only one I have. So he took it to the station. They made a copy. And that Saturday morning on the FM radio station in Greensboro, Bob introduced my song, Rachel's song, and played it. And we heard it, of course, on the radio, and I still have a tape recording of that first time I heard it on the radio. And I was just blown away with it. And apparently everybody else was too, because it wasn't about an hour later the station manager for that radio station called me, and he says, Dave, I've been in radio for over 20 years, and something just happened that has never happened to me. He said, soon as Bob played your song on the radio, said our phone bank lit up. Everybody was calling in saying, what is that song you just played? Would you play it again and tell us more about this guy from Winston-Salem and whatever? And you know, that radio station played Rachel's song virtually every hour for the next couple of years. I mean, you couldn't turn on the radio and listen to it for an hour. You didn't hear Rachel's song. The DJs loved it. The audience loved it. And so that's when I realized the next thing about this was that this had some value to people, that they wanted to buy it. And I didn't have anything to sell it. All I had was just my master and that. So I started making copies. You're gonna laugh at this. I would buy blank cassette tapes, and I've got right over here in my studio, I still have the machine. It's a two cassette deck machine. You put a master in one side and a blank in the other and push record, and it will copy that cassette tape right over onto the second one. I was making cassette tapes one at a time and then selling them to whoever wanted to buy it for the cost of the cassette tape.
Dave, before we get into the business side of this, because this is like 5 or 6 years in the making for this song.
Yeah.
And just a series of defining moments, as you put it, right? From the time that you wrote it, to the time that you named it, to the time that you partnered with Gary Prim to record it. When you were sitting there at the piano, just noodling, not really thinking that you were composing a song, like looking back now, how do you view that? Like, was this just a gift that just showed up? Because I do want to note that there's kind of a cool thing in Rachel's song where, like, there's a verse that has, like, you hit on a minor chord and then it goes to a major chord. And I'm thinking the way that you describe songwriting, it was kind of accidental. Like, you didn't sit down saying, I want to have like a sad mood, I want to have a happy mood. When you were sitting there at the piano, what were you thinking as you were playing that song?
It's really strange that it was almost to me as if that song already existed. I know it sounds strange, but it did. I kind of heard the next part of the song as I was playing it. You know, how you can, in any like a rock and roll song, you can, the C, A minor, F, and G kind of rock and roll song, if you hear one and you hear another one that's in the same pattern, you know what's coming up. They're going to go from C to A minor, and the next thing's going to be an F or a D minor. So it's predictable. And in my head, I think as I was playing this song, the notes just seemed to, and I knew where to go next. And I knew when I finished that verse, when it was in the key of C, it was a C, A minor, D minor, and G was the basic structure of the verse. I knew that I needed a chorus, and I needed to go into the four chord, which is F. And I played that part, and it just seemed natural to me to go from F to F minor. It just, that just felt the right part of a chorus for that song. It's really F minor 6, I guess, the chord. But it just, I didn't really plan it that way. I didn't think that needs to be a sad kind of chord or anything. It really, I felt it as I was playing it. And I know that sounds strange, but looking back, I have no other explanation except that it was given to me. I think it was inspired. And I guess I may never know exactly where it came from, but it was a gift to me from God Almighty. It's just, He gives people, I think, inspiration and songs. You can talk to lots of songwriters. They'll tell you the same thing, that a lot of times they have no idea where this song came from. They just jotted, talk to Dolly Parton. Lord, she has written thousands of songs. She's liable to write it on a napkin or whatever she can find when the inspiration hits. And so that, to me, that's kind of how I didn't really plan it. I didn't think about it at the time, and I wasn't trying to be happy, sad, or anything. Now, there's one aspect of this that I didn't tell you about. 1 month before, I had lost my father. He got killed in a car wreck in Florida, and 3 days before Christmas. And that was a very first time I'd ever lost anybody close in my family. And for a young guy to lose his father, he was only 61 years old, and to lose him at that age was just unbelievable. And I think it was the grieving process. Grieving can do lots of things to a person, and you're basically, you have a lot of emotions inside of you, and sometimes they come out through tears and sometimes through other means. But I really think, and my father was such an influence on me with my music. He and I played music together for years. We would sing duets together, and he taught me how to play my first song. And so music and me and my father were an interconnection. And so maybe part of my grieving process might have been the spilling out of those emotions onto the keyboard. And when you listen to Rachel's song, I have people that tell me, I laugh, I cry, I feel the whole roller coaster of emotions come to me, through me, when I listen to that song. And I think, well, maybe it is those emotions that I was going through at that time in my life that came out of me and into that song. So maybe that has a part of it. I don't know.
Well, I've heard you say that your dad would rather play music than eat. So maybe this was a gift from your dad. Who knows?
Well, I had somebody else suggested that to me, that he was communicating to me from on high and saying, okay, Dave, play this song. It's one we didn't ever play together, but here it is. Now you play it. But that has been suggested, and that may well be true. I'm going to be sure and ask him when I see him next.
Dave, it's a beautiful story of how this one song developed over a number of years. And you did have music in your family, but not the music business. So I want to hear a little bit about the business side that enabled you to eventually quit your job. And I think that was in 1992.
That's correct. Once I had the recording on all those radio stations around the country and people were wanting copies, I did get CDs made of Rachel's song. The first 7 songs that I've written are on the CD, and I had copies of cassette tapes and CDs made. But I didn't know how in the world I was going to sell them. I knew that people had written to me. Now, I knew that people that wrote to me wanted to buy it. I could have no trouble selling it to them. But in terms of turning it into a viable business model, something that you could run as a profitable business, I wasn't sure how I was going to do that.
I think a lot of great songs have just sort of died in the closet and no one heard them.
Yeah, exactly. And even if somebody heard them, maybe they went to the wrong promoter or something, and they just took them to the cleaners, and that was the end of that song or the end of their career. So I didn't know what I was going to do. All I knew was that people wanted to buy it. And then we kept thinking of, well, maybe the record stores, maybe those chains of record stores, which we used to have, would carry my music. So I approached those people, and I got nowhere. It was one of those things where they didn't want to have anything to do with me. They never heard of Dave Combs. They heard of Michael Jackson, but they never heard of Dave Combs. And so I didn't get anywhere. I was very discouraged. And then I was working in Bethesda, Maryland at the time, and a lady that sat in the office right next to mine, she loved Rachel's song, and she said, I have a friend who owns a gift shop that I'd love to give a CD of Rachel's song to. Would that be okay? I said, well, sure, here's a CD of Rachel's song, give it to her. And this gift shop was in Old Town, Alexandria. Now, you've been to Old Town on, King Street. King Street is just full of wonderful restaurants and shops and everything. It's a great tourist attraction. You go down to the Potomac River and walk the river walk, and it's a beautiful place to visit. Well, she owned a gift shop on King Street called America. She sold everything red, white, and blue. Anything political that had to do with patriotic, she sold it in her shop. And she played patriotic music. She had a CD player and a great sound system, and she played John Philip Sousa and all these patriotic songs. And then my friend Leslie gave Jane a CD of Rachel's song. Well, she had a 5 CD changer. So 4 of the 5 were all these really fantastic patriotic songs. And then here comes Rachel's song and its album. And every time Rachel's song came on and played in the shop, everybody in the shop stopped where they were and came over to the counter and asked Jane, do you have that music for sale? I want to take that home with me. I love that music. And she didn't, of course, all she had was that 1 CD. So she calls me at work and she says, she introduces herself and tells me what's going on. And she said, would you sell me some CDs and cassette tapes at wholesale that I can sell to my customers? I said, well, sure. And we reached, I'd never sold any at wholesale before. I didn't even know what kind of a markup or what kind of a discount to give her. So I said, okay, they sell for $14. I'll sell them to you. Let's do a $8. So she said, okay, that's fine. So she'll make $6 and I'll make $8 minus the cost of the CD, and it'd be fair. So she said, well, bring me a bunch. Can you bring them tonight? I said, okay. So Linda and I got home that night and we boxed up a box of cassette tapes and CDs, took them down to Old Town to Jane and left them with her. And 2 or 3 days later, she calls me back and she said, Dave, I got a problem. You need to bring me some more, and how about doubling the order this time? I said, okay, I'll bring you some tonight. So we go back down to Old Town and bring her a box of tapes and CDs. And we did that trip every week for over a year. She sold thousands of tapes and CDs out of that one little shop, just playing that one record. She quit playing the John Philip Sousa stuff. She just started playing Rachel's song all the time because that's all the people wanted to buy. And she just sold thousands of them. And that was the time that, now I have my MBA from Wake Forest University, so I am a business person and I'm very analytical. And so I saw that this model of her gift shop was probably something that I needed to really analyze and see if it's something I want to duplicate. So I made me a spreadsheet. You'll appreciate this. I made a spreadsheet with one column. It said how many cassette tapes and CDs that Jane had sold in her shop, how much they cost me, how much I sold them to her for, and figured up the gross profit on her sales. And that was one column. I said to Linda, I said, you know, maybe we could find one gift shop like that in every state. That's reasonable. That's not pushing the limit. Let's make me another column in my spreadsheet. Column 2 is 1 times 50. So you take column 2 times 50, my gross profit is, whoa, that's a good sized number. And I said, well, maybe 5. Let's do 5 gift shops in every state, 250 total for the whole country. All right, column 3 is column 1 times 250. And then down at the bottom, I said, Linda, come here, you got to see this. This number here at the bottom is twice what I make at AT&T. So then I said, now we know what we got to do. We've got a model that works, a business model. We know it works. And all we have to do is duplicate it. Just find and replicate this one model. And it's kind of the franchise model in the business world. But I need to just duplicate this. And so that's how I started finding other gift shops. First of all, we did it by just shoe leather. We'd go on a weekend to Occoquan and other places, gift shop, tourist towns around, and find these gift shops and walk in the store. And if I heard music playing, I'd say to the owner, I'd say, would you consider playing my music as well? And if your customers like it, let me know. We'll sell you some. Did that every weekend for a long time till we about exhausted the radius that we could comfortably go in a car. You know, within a 100-mile radius is about as far as you could go. So then I decided I needed to expand my marketing to the rest of the country. So how am I going to do this? I went to the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., since we were working there, and into the area. They had the yellow pages. They had phone books, real phone books back then. They had a room full. Every phone book in the country was in that room. So all I had to do was go find certain cities that I wanted, make a Xerox copy of the gift shop pages in the back, and take that home and start calling. Well, one thing I noticed was when I was calling most popular urban areas, I didn't get very good reception. I'd have to call 30 gift shops to find one that would even agree for me to send them a free sample to listen to. And that was a lot of phone calls. I mean, I called from 10 in the morning till my voice gave out at 6 o'clock, one right after another on the weekends. And maybe at the end of the weekend, Saturday and Sunday, I'd have maybe 20, 30 gift shops that I'd prepare packages and send them. And almost all of them that I sent to became customers, which was a good sign. But then something dawned on me that I was wasting a lot of time getting 29 no's just to get one yes. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. And so my analytical brain kicked in again, and I said, okay, we know now that my best market is in tourist towns. And if you stop and think about it, what really makes up a tourist town? Gift shops in a tourist town have a brand new set of customers every day. It's not the repeat customers coming in. You'll have a few of those. But it's a brand new swath of customers coming in. It's like in Union Station in Washington, D.C., you got a whole new bunch of people getting off the train to come to D.C. Well, I decided I need to start prospecting in these tourist towns, because when I called in those towns, I would get a yes about every 4 or 5 calls I made. But I didn't know where these tourist towns were. And I called the Chamber of Commerce of the states and asked them, can you give me a list of the tourist towns in Kansas or Missouri or wherever? Well, no, we don't have such a list. And the National Chamber of the National Department of Commerce, I was right there, so I tried to find somebody there. Nope, we don't have anything like that. Better Business Bureau, nope, we don't have anything like that. So I thought, well, I'm not giving up. I said, I know there's 2 factors that make a definition of a tourist town. How many gift shops are in a little town, like Gatlinburg, Tennessee? You can go through the Gatlinburg list of gift shops, and there might be 75 or 80 gift shops in Gatlinburg. But what's the permanent population of Gatlinburg? Well, I don't know, maybe 1,500 people? Well, there's no way in the world 1,500 people can support 75 gift shops, right? So I said, that's the ratio that I need to approach. But how am I going to get that data? Well, I found out I could buy the mailing list for all the gift shops in the entire country. And it was a computer printout then. Now they just send you a thumb drive, or you could just, they just tell you to download it. But back then they sent me a printout. It was about 4 inches thick, big wide computer paper, page after page after page, alphabetical by city within state and alphabetical within the city of the gift shops. And it had the gift shop name, the address, the phone number, the manager or the owner's name, and enough contact information. So, wow, okay, I got that piece. And I went through that entire printout and counted for every state or every town, how many gift shops in this town. And made me a spreadsheet. Here I'm going back to my computer technology. I made a spreadsheet with the city and the state of the town, or the town and the state, how many gift shops in a column, in a cell. And then I said, I need the population of that place. Well, I worked right across the street from the public library. If you want to know something, go ask a librarian, right? I mean, they know everything. So I went and asked her, I said, how can I find the population of all these little towns across the country? She said, oh, we got a book right here that'll do that. She brought out this big old book. I wish I should have brought it in here to show you. It's about 2.5 feet by 3 feet by about this thick, hardbound book. It weighs about 12 pounds, and it's called the U.S. Marketing Atlas. I think they still make the book. I don't know whether you can buy a hard copy or not, but it was a hard book, and it had every crossroad in the United States with their population and a few other census data about it. So then I had the population data, I had the gift shop counts, and put that in my spreadsheet. And then, of course, with the computer, you can say, well, automatically calculate the ratio of population per gift shop. What's the population per gift shop of this town on average? And that ratio, the smaller the number, the more likely it is a tourist town, right? So you'd have a very small population with a lot of gift shops. Well, sure enough, I had it sort the spreadsheet by that ratio. Well, it was like cream rising to the top. Right at the top of the list of Tennessee, Gatlinburg. Right at the top of the list of North Carolina is Blowing Rock. Top of the list in Maryland was Occoquan and other places that I knew were tourist towns. And here out in Kansas or Missouri or North Dakota or whatever, there were towns and low ratios. Bingo. Starting calling from the top of the list to prioritize it. My hit ratio went from 1 in 30 to 1 in 5 and sometimes even better. So that was the aha moment for me to use big data. We didn't even call it big data back then, or analytics. It was just connecting the dots for me. And I was able to grow my gift shops then from a small handful to over 1,000 gift shops across the country playing and selling my music. So that's how I turned my little one model that worked into a thriving business that I had to hire an employee. I bought the CDs by the pallet load, 5,000 at a time on a big truck. And so that's my growth story, and using my analytical mind and using big data and analytics.
That is brilliant problem solving through data mining and a real success story. You fast forward to today, you have 120 songs, 14 albums. How lucrative has music been for you?
Well, it was, like all businesses, you go through a growth cycle, and then it kind of trails off unless you have a new product or something that replaces that product life cycle. And through the 1990s, that I rode that cycle very, very well. I made a very, very good living with it. In fact, with this album called Celebrate Freedom, it basically funded a scholarship at Wake Forest University for the military students. It's called Celebrate Freedom, the Combs Celebrate Freedom Scholarship, and it's an endowed scholarship funded by this album, and it basically made enough money from this one album to endow an entire scholarship, and we've had 27 recipients of that scholarship over the years. And so the money that did come in, I was able to buy my brand new grand piano. That was the first thing I ever bought with my profits, was a new piano that I didn't have to tune every once in a while. But it was very, very lucrative.
Well, it's so nice that you can, the song, Rachel's song, and then music more generally changed your life. You have a new book called Touched by the Music, How the Story and Music of Rachel's Song Can Change Your Life. How do you think that the story can change the reader's life?
Well, over the years, I have received over 50,000 notes and letters from people who wrote their stories to me, some in very great detail and some of them very emotional, about how my music touched their life in a very meaningful way. And in some cases, for example, some lady wrote me who was a recovering alcoholic. She attributes that my music saved her life. She said, "Your music got me through my getting over my disease of alcoholism and really saved my life." I have several others that told me the same thing. This was just a postcard that I got from a young man who, you may not remember these, but there was something called an iron lung. Back when we had polio that would paralyze people, they'd put them in an iron lung for assisted breathing. And this man said that your music, he said, I'm in an iron lung. He said, but your music brought me back to life 3 times. So, it was things like that. It changes people's life. It touches them in ways that there's no way you could plan on it. It just, if they're going through depression and you bring them some relief and you bring them out of that depression, who knows what you might have prevented. And somebody that's dealing with pain, I'm told by a lot of people that have pain issues that listening to my music in the right environment through headphones and whatever can kind of just take their mind off the pain, and it relieves that part of them. So that's the part when I'm saying it can change your life. It can change your lifestyle and make you a more less stress-filled individual and make your life more pleasurable anyway. Anecdotally, I've got those 50,000 letters that tell me that, and that's why it prompted me to write my book. Other than hanging around the house with the pandemic and not being able to go anywhere, my wife says, "Get over there and write this book that we've been talking about for 10 years." So, so I did get to writing it, but it was largely prompted by those stories of people telling me that how my music had touched them, and that Linda came up with the title of the book, "Touched by the Music," and it just seemed the appropriate title, and it really is a story, a series of stories of how it not only changed my life, but through my music, it has touched and changed the lives of other people as well.
Dave, how does hearing those stories, how does that make you feel?
It's very humbling to start with. When I read some of these stories, I have to kind of pinch myself to say, well, I'm so blessed that I'm the one that was first wrote and played the song, but I'm so pleased that I had the foresight to get it out there and let somebody hear it. So it's very confirming, first of all, that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. When people tell you what they're being blessed by something that you created, then that's confirming that you are where you're supposed to be and doing what you're supposed to be doing.
I like to ask all the Inspired Money guests, how do you define success?
I define it not in terms of the money that I have made over the years or the money that still comes in from the music. I measure success in the number of lives that I feel that I have reached and touched. And that's why I'm working so hard. I've got another podcast like this at 5 o'clock and another one at 7 o'clock tonight. But I am working very hard to get the word out about my music, and my book helps to do that because it tells the stories and inspires people to go and listen to it. But I think my mission is to spread my music out to those millions and millions of people that have never heard Rachel's song before. I've had millions that have heard it, but still there's millions, if not billions, of people that haven't heard it yet. So my mission is to really continue spreading the music around the world and hoping to reach people, and that's why I do this.
It's a beautiful story. It sounds like Linda was very supportive throughout, encouraging you to record your song so that you would have that as part of your legacy, encouraging you to write the book. Were there voices, were there people telling you that your dream is crazy or this is never going to work along the way?
Among my friends, I would say no. I have been blessed with friends who have always been supportive. It's the business community, when you try to monetize something, whether it's to get a new customer, somebody to agree to play it or agree to sell it or to agree to do something for you, that's where you get the pushback. And that's, I think for entrepreneurs, they're all familiar with this turn down from all the people that they approach, whether it's for support or to buy their product or anything. It's those people that can be discouraging. But you just have to work and look beyond that and realize that no does not mean no. Sometimes no just means not yet. And I've kept that attitude and tried not to let anybody get me down or to steal my dream here. I still have the dream of helping people and spreading the music. I love to be around a person the first time they ever hear Rachel's song. I love watching them, the expressions on their face and their emotions that as they go through listening to my music, or when I'm playing it. Sometimes I'll play Rachel's song in a church service or for a group or whatever, and the response, and I can just feel it, as you're playing the song, there's just something about that connection with your audience that they are getting the true meaning of the music.
It's all about the feel. Well, thank you for sharing your story about your music and getting a lot of no's, but you also got a lot of yeses along the way and how to deal with that. Tell the Inspired Money listeners and viewers where to listen to your music, where to find your book, and where to follow you.
I've tried to make that really, really simple. If you can spell my last name, it's Combs. My website is just Combs Music, COMBS music.com. And when you go to my homepage, it's not a real fancy one. You'll get to the first part of the page, and on the left side of the page, you'll see a picture of my book. And on the right side, you'll see the picture of my CD, Rachel's Song. And underneath it, there'll be a couple of link buttons you can click. One says purchase the book from Amazon, and on the right, it's purchase the CD and the music from Amazon. But in the middle of my website, there's a link that says play Rachel's Song. If you click on that, it will play Rachel's Song right on your computer, and it's the whole song. It's not a sample, and it's not a cheap version of it. It's the real deal. It'll play for the whole song, and listen to it. And then up on the top of the website, of course, you've got links to go look at the rest of my music. I have 15 albums and 11 piano music books and so forth, but you can find that later. But right on my website is the book, my CD, and play Rachel's Song, and combsmusic.com. And you can also write to me on an email. Down at the bottom is a link to send me an email at dave@combsmusic.com. I read them all, I answer them all, and I love to hear from folks. So it's about that simple.
Thanks so much, Dave. Great to have you on the show. So what was your favorite Inspired Money moment? I love Dave's willingness to cold call gift shops all over the country to sell his music. Best of all, he used data to improve his closing rate. It's a great lesson in resourcefulness and grit, two things that can differentiate a successful business from the rest. If you had a different favorite Inspired Money moment, please post a comment or share it in the Inspired Money Makers Facebook group at inspiredmoney.fm/Facebook. Thank you for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe to my email that goes out every 2 weeks. It's investment focused, and the Runnymede investment team highlights data, news, and events that we think are worth sharing. Subscribe at inspiredmoney.fm/newsletter. It's free and informative. Thank you for joining me on this mission. Have an inspired week and do something that scares you, because that's where the magic happens.